Welcome to the Dork Forest. Jackie and her pals will never bore us. Shameless confessions
about our obsession
will make us laugh and smile. So let's explore the Dork Forest and dork out for a while.
Hello and welcome to the Dork Forest. This is Jackie Cation. You know the websites, JackieCation.com, DorkForest.com, TheDorkForest.com, FamilyPetAncestry.com for no particular reason, except it made me laugh. And here, let's do the credits. Mike Rickberg composed and sang the theme to the Dork Forest. He will sing again at the end. He has made up lyrics to the Mexican hat dance, and he'll sing again at the end. In the beginning, he sings with his girlfriend, Sarah Cohen. Vilmos fixes my website, JackieCation.com. So you can go to his, on the bottom, hiredguncoding.com, and get your website done if you like, with Vilmos. And then Patrick Brady's going to fix this audio. I'm using lavaliers in the middle of Ann Arbor, Michigan. Hopefully he will, well, it'll be lovely because he can fix things. It's December. I'm about to do a show in Phoenix, Arizona, opening for Brian Regan. Me and everyone who's ever, I guess, opened for him, everyone's doing fives, and then we're going to hang out. And that's exciting at the Comerica Arena in Phoenix. 5,000 people. Very exciting. That is comedy. And then in January, most of January, I am in New York City doing various shows and a live Dork Forest at the New York Podcast Festival. And then at the end of January, I'm at Acme in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the Old Home Club. Very fun. Now, it is December, so for the rest of the month, if you find a food bank and donate to them. Don't donate to the Dork Forest this month. Find a food bank. Google the name of your town, village, or city and the words food bank, and it will pop up. And then give them the 10, 20, or $100 that you were going to give the Dork Forest. And that'll be good. In January, I'll be back to shilling for me. If you were to want a Dork Forest item or one of my new CDs or DVD, you would go to JackieCation.com and the store. You can get yourself a Ranger of the Dork Forest or the old Dork Forest t-shirts designed by Brett Chambers, the Ranger t-shirt designed by Sam and Beemel Ben-Rud, my nephew. And they're American-made, union-made t-shirts, so they run big because they're made by Americans. And they are $25. That includes shipping. You can get a hoodie, a zip hoodie, and that is $50 domestic, $60 international. And that too includes shipping. Those are not union made because I wasn't going to make a lot of them, but for some reason I have 2 of each size. So you can buy them until they're done, and that's about it. You'll get trinkets and that type of thing. And stand-up has been mentioned. Credits have been mentioned. How about allthingscomedy.com? They're the podcast host for the Dork Forest. You could also email me if you ever want to do that. Jackie@JackieCation.com. Tell me what's going on. I read those letters very, very slowly in the Dork Addendums. I'm still in 2012. So, and then you can review the show on iTunes if you like. That's supposed to be a thing. My new album, This Will Make an Excellent Horcrux, which is also available as a video, DVD, with a bonus track, was on Vulture's top 11 comedy specials of the year. So I'm very proud of that. Let's get into the show. Thanks for listening.
Hello, Rangers. My name is Joe Wilson, and some of you might recognize my voice from the first 2 years of the Dork Forest when I co-hosted with Jackie. I left the forest to tell stories, and I'd like to tell you one. This story is both a live-action series and a graphic novel. The live-action series has cast members like Marcia Wallace, who was the voice of Edna Krabappel on The Simpsons, Kirsten Van Ness, who you might know as Penelope Garcia on Criminal Minds. The story is about Don, a hitman who dies, does the whole light at the end of the tunnel thing, and hears the voices of people he killed, and comes back to life very inspired not to die. Ever. So he arranges to become a vampire, and never planned on biting his wife, but then he got hungry, and his wife bit her mother, who is now moving in for eternity. Vampire Mob. It's a comedy, a drama, has a little action, a lot of swearing, and you can watch and read it right now for free at vampiremob.com. Thanks. I hope you enjoy it. vampiremob.com.
Hey folks, welcome. I am playing the Ann Arbor Showcase in Ann Arbor, Michigan, oddly enough, and so I'm sitting in my hotel room with friend of the show, Beth Schumann. Welcome to the program.
Hello.
You are holding a tiny lavalier.
I have a little lav.
A little lav that I don't have clips for, but Patrick Brady was like, you should definitely do this instead of hold the Zoom at people. And so I'm trying it. I'm giving it a shot. Yep. And it sounds pretty good in my headphones, so I think it's going to be A good idea. So it's at Beth Schumann on Twitter.
That's right.
And it's Beth Schumann hyphen? Korzinski?
No.
Or just all one word?
No, 3 words all
3
together.
words.
Beth Schumann and Korchinski is the last word.
Korczynski.
Right. Phonetic if you're Polish.
It's a beautiful, beautiful
Right.
Polish name.
Yes.
It's very nice.
Well, as you know, Jackie, I actually used to live in California and
Right.
have only recently moved to the Midwest. And the one thing I will say is that very few people mispronounce my real
Korczynski.
last name here,
Yeah.
as opposed to in California.
Sunnyvale, they have no idea.
They have no idea.
Here in Ann Arbor, last night I ate at the European restaurant, right around the corner from the new place where the comedy club is, the Amadeus. It's called the European restaurant, and it is when they say European, they mean Polish.
Yeah, they mean Poland.
Hungarian.
I think they
mean
Eastern
Bloc.
Europe. Exactly. Yeah.
It's exciting.
So, yeah, because, actually, we had to travel about an hour and a half in California to get to a really, really good Eastern European restaurant.
Well, Sunnyvale, you could get Vietnamese sandwiches coming out your ears.
Right. And now here in Ann Arbor, there's only 2 places I know of where you can get a Vietnamese sandwich.
Well, good for them for having any access
Exactly,
to the Vietnamese
exactly.
sandwich. If you haven't had a Vietnamese sandwich, my friends, get yourself out there. A banh mi.
A banh mi.
With an H. B-A-H-N.
No, I think it's B-A-N-H.
Oh, that'll happen. You know that in college, I wrote a 20-page paper about Gandhi for my Indian political science class, and I spelled Gandhi wrong the entire actually, not the entire one. It would have been better if I would have picked one. I spelled it with an H in the beginning, and then I spelled it with an H at the end, just mixing it up. One of my friends said, I would have failed you. I totally would have failed you. But my teacher was Indian, and so very, very mellow. He was like, it doesn't matter, really.
Because probably it's an acceptable spelling no matter what.
Well, it's all in English anyway.
Exactly,
so
that's what I mean.
You're
It's
just like, I wonder.
transliterated or whatever.
Yeah, who picked that anyway?
Yeah.
The British.
Yeah, right.
And so they're like, do whatever you want. What do we care? We're used to being marginalized. That's what the Indians were probably.
That's right.
And,
That's we don't care how you spell
exactly.
it. It's very warm here.
You were on an earlier episode of The Dork
Yes.
Forest, and it was you and somebody else, and I've spaced.
It was
Oh, really? Good for you.
Mike.
His name was
Lee?
Mike? Might have been Mike Lee. That sounds about right. It was back when I was having 2 people on because I didn't know. It's a learned skill, the podcasting, the interviewing, and all that. But I like to do the one-on-one now. I'm pro that. Unless it's a live one, then it's a panel, and it's a dork free-for-all as far as I can tell.
Mark Lee.
Mark Lee. Nice
That's
work.
right.
But you spoke of Shakespeare.
Yes.
And now you've come back and you say your new dorkdom is fungus.
That's
mushrooms.
correct. Fungus.
Hallucinogenic mushrooms?
No, but, I also do comedy, so I've started doing a joke where I say that I have a new hobby, mushrooms. And of course, everyone, that's the first thing they think of,
Right.
because we're all very mature. And so my tag then, in order to get the laugh, is I am tripping my balls off right now.
Right. Fallopian balls.
Exactly. My lady balls are all trippy. So actually I've been kind of into mushrooms for a while since meeting the Korczynski person, because Eastern Europeans that's like their national pastime. Like we have baseball and they have mushroom foraging.
Mushroom foraging.
Yes.
That's your fellas that
So my
introduced you.
yes. So my husband introduced me on one of our early first dates. We went mushroom hunting, but we went mushroom hunting at De La Viega Park in Santa Cruz, so it's like beautiful and, so it really wasn't.
So it was a beautiful hike.
It was a hike.
And then he was like, I happen to know what mushrooms are edible and what are not.
Right. Well, it was during the weekend of the fungus fair that they have every year.
That's awesome. Santa Cruz has a fungus fair?
Santa Cruz has a fungus fair once a year, and it's always I think right after the first of the year. So
right.
So it might be coming up soon, I guess.
Sure.
But so it was the weekend of the fungus fair, and what they'll do is if you go foraging that day, you can bring your stuff in to have it identified by their experts,
wow.
as part of like the activities at the fungus fair.
And they're cool with you picking mushrooms. Like nobody has any problem
you
Because
mean
you're not supposed to pick flowers.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Well, yes, and it depends, I think, on where you are. Like, certainly private land, you can pick what you want to. The interesting thing about that is a mushroom is a fruiting body. So it's kind of like picking an apple off of a tree.
Oh, more will grow.
More will grow.
Okay.
The majority of the mushroom is of the fungus, actually. The mushroom is the part we see. But the business end of the organism is the
root.
Well,
it's underground.
It's called
What the hell is a mushroom?
Oh, now I'm forgetting the word. It's a myco something or other.
Okay.
But it's made out of like these little thin hairs. Like if you kind of actually pull a mushroom off the end of a log, like if it's, eating on a decayed log or whatever, you might see some of those like little thin hairs. The word, of course, is escaping me entirely now, but it will come. It will come eventually.
Sure.
But yeah, so the mushroom part is the fruiting body. It's the sex organ of
they
the
are
fungus.
sexy. I love a fucking mushroom.
I'm
Hobbit-like.
Yeah, there's so many cool ones and cool looking things and everything. So we went to this fungus fair and we were looking for porcini, right, which is, one of the top quality mushrooms. Everyone's looking for them gourmet. They're very expensive in the store.
Okay.
And I think I bent over to tie my shoe or something like that and came face to face with something called a fluted black elfin saddle. Now, come on.
That is the greatest name ever.
That is almost the greatest name ever. And so they're little, they're black, they're incredibly hard to find. And on my first mushroom foraging ever, I like accidentally find these things.
These rare, and are they beautiful?
They're really cool looking. They're really cool looking. And they're called elfin saddles because it looks like a little elf could sit on their back and ride them somewhere, but they're teeny tiny. So like it wouldn't be big elves. It would have to be more like they're like pinky size. It'd have to be more like little fairies could probably ride them, but not elves. But anyway.
Tinkerbell
could,
elfin saddle.
And so we brought him into the fungus fair thing and the guy's like, oh, wow, where did you find these? These are so hard to find. Just because I don't know if they're rare, but mostly just because of the color and they're really small. Like they're just hard to distinguish on the ground. You're looking at the
people
ground,
don't necessarily see. Interesting.
So, they're edible also, but we didn't eat them because I was like a little, it was my first one. And this is actually something that's quite interesting when you tell people you're into mushrooms is like the reaction people have about, and you eat them, like.
Right. Are they like, because mushrooms can be poisonous? Because I know that, I hung out with a guy, back in the 90s who, Kevin Andrus Willington III is what I call him. He's an artist and he's a great artist, but, his name was Kevin Andrus, and he legally changed it to Willington for numerology reasons.
Oh, cool.
And so, we do not judge here at the Dork Forest. So I've always called him Kevin Andrus Willington III. And he's a great artist, but, he macrobiotic and we were driving to go sell merch. I was working at Northern Sun Merchandising, Hippie Skippy t-shirt poster shop. And we were driving to Colorado with a truck full of t-shirts and posters and whatnot to sell at some eco thing. And we stopped at Pine Ridge Reservation because he wanted to look for, there were berries and stuff. And so we're wandering around and he's looking at the ground. He's like, look at this fruited thing. And I was like, yeah, that's on the ground. You don't want to eat that. And he was like, that's where food comes from, Jackie. The ground. That's, it's growing out of the earth. And it was the first time I really realized, my grandmother had a garden when I was a kid, but it was a tomato. It was a bell pepper. It was a zucchini. It wasn't a weird spiky fruit that coming off of a desert plant in the middle of a reservation.
Right. Yeah. So, I think that is actually kind of,
so I think that's what people creeped out, kind of.
Yeah. Especially maybe our generation, before, like, our parents, it was uncool to, grow your own food.
Right,
like you were poor if you grew your own food,
Right.
Now it's the thing to do for health reasons and, to save the planet and everything.
Man. Yeah.
But our parents were like, oh, look, if it doesn't come out of a can, it's not space age enough for my children.
Right,
and
exactly. We're on the moon. Yeah, no, that is so true.
Yeah,
though,
we had
because
space age foods.
it was all Tang, and we're like, well, this is, if you add water to it, it's Willy Wonka food.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So people are kind of freaked out about food coming out of the ground. And not only that, but food that looks different from what they're used to eating. Food,
Oh, right. Right, because people fear the weird.
Yeah. I mean, you find wild carrots and you pull them up and they're teeny tiny little misshapen things.
Yeah.
But they're still carrots. But
And they taste amazing.
And they taste amazing. But other people are like, I don't think I should be eating that.
Yeah, that didn't get processed, and Monsanto didn't have anything to do with it. So they make everything look pretty.
Right.
So that's your first time foraging, and you find that. So you guys didn't eat that. Did the guy keep them?
No. Actually, I guess we left them with him, so I don't know what he did. Maybe he ate them. I don't really know. I'm not even sure if they're supposed to be because mushrooms really kind of fall into a lot of different edibility categories, there are the deadly ones that
which ones are they?
Well,
any idea offhand?
Yeah, there's one that a lot of people die from.
Oh, really?
Every year. They call it the death angel or the destroying angel.
Wow.
Yeah. And, I'm really not very good with Latin names. That's one of the things I want to get better at, but I believe it's some sort of an amanita. So this one is, it's really pretty. It's white and it calls to you from across the forest floor, because
and it looks like
glimmery. Oh, it's like a perfect mushroom shape with a cap and a stem, and it's kind of white with a golden sheen, and it just looks so nice. But apparently, just one bite of that is enough to shut down all your organ functions. So, yeah. Okay, and then
don't just randomly eat mushrooms,
do
people.
not. Oh, please. That's the number one rule is if you can't identify it to the species, you are not supposed to eat it.
Yeah.
And number two is you're not supposed to eat mushrooms raw, even the stuff you buy at the store.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, you're probably going to be
in
okay.
Salads and stuff, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, for the most part, you'll probably be okay with those. But all fungus have some sort of mild amount of toxin in them that's better to cook off.
Okay.
And so, I mean, most people just don't probably eat enough of those raw mushrooms all at once to actually feel a discomfort.
Yeah, mushrooms are expensive.
But if you were to sit and eat a whole bunch of raw mushrooms, you might end up just not really feeling very good, at least.
Oh, interesting.
So there's the super deadly ass fungus. And then there's ones that are they're going to make you sick. I really would not recommend that at all. Then there's ones that are kind of not really digestible. They're inedible because they're too woody. You can't really digest it.
Okay.
And then you get the edible category. And in the edible category, there's a whole bunch that are probably edible, but why bother?
They're not tasty?
They're not super tasty. They're too little. You have to do too much cleaning or extra. You peel something off of them or whatever. What's the point? And then you have the choice category.
So the choice category are like the buttons and the porcinis.
Well, so buttons are a little tough because they look like so many other things that could be poisonous. So if you're foraging in the woods, you don't want to grab something that looks like a button mushroom you'd find in the grocery store. But the porcinis, boletes, that's in the bolete genus or whatever. And I want to get better at the Latin names. That's one of my things. There's oyster mushrooms.
Oh,
yeah. So oyster mushrooms, you can buy those in a store. They're actually
kind of tall and skinny. Is that right? Those are straw mushrooms.
Those are the hinoki, I think, or the enoki
Japanese.
or whatever, Japanese straw. But the oyster mushrooms, they'll sell them at Whole Foods or other places like that because they can be cultivated. They'll sell pink ones and yellow ones. And
oh, wow.
I think my current Facebook profile picture is of a pink oyster mushroom that looks a little ladylike.
Oh, it's a pretty one.
It's sort of pretty. It looks a little pornographic, actually, but
sure, it's a little Georgia.
It's a George O'Keeffe mushroom. Exactly, that's what it is. So
right. The mystery.
Yeah,
the mystery of the mushroom.
So in California, I lived there for over 20 years, and you get fantastic boletes, porcinis, just, oh man, fantastic. But mushrooms, they pop out of the ground. They're triggered by the rainfall. And it only rains in California like 2 or 3 times a year, but when it does, buckets of rain come down. And so we had more limited mushroom season in California.
Oh, for looking for mushrooms.
For looking for mushrooms.
Okay.
Right.
Wow. That's why the fair is at a certain time of year, I bet.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, and actually pretty much all mushrooms, fruit at a certain time of year, and whatever it is, causes and conditions come together, and that,
And that's when it is.
That's
what
when
time
it
of
is.
year is it?
So in California, because it usually only rains in the winter, that's really mushroom season is in the late fall and the winter. Like I found some of the best mushrooms right around Thanksgiving time all the way through to January.
Oh, wow.
And because you want it to rain and then warm up for a little teeny bit, and that'll kind of get the mushrooms popping.
Right, because they're a fungus. So what is, because they grow out of like dead trees?
Yeah, so they grow on everything. It's called, I remembered the word, it's mycelia.
Mycelia.
Mycelia. And so actually fungus are everywhere.
Everywhere?
Everywhere, absolutely everywhere. You probably have some inside of it's probably part of your DNA that's not your DNA. They tell us that a large percentage of the stuff that we carry around with our bodies every day is not our own DNA. And there's probably some fungus in there too. If you have athlete's foot, you're carrying fungus around with you.
Oh, yeah. That's a pretty obvious fungi. So is fungus good or bad?
If fungus is neutral, like pretty much everything in the world. There are...
It can be used for good or evil?
It can be used for good or evil. So fungus... they're everywhere. There's teeny tiny ones. Lichen is a kind of a fungus that's actually fungus and algae that have a symbiotic relationship is actually what lichen is.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. It was kind of fascinating.
And lichen grows on trees, right?
And rocks and
rocks.
stuff like that.
Okay,
Yeah, it grows on trees. It grows on rocks. It grows on like
it's just
stumps
kind of loose
and everything.
Yeah.
So then within what we normally call a mushroom, they refer to those, that category as kind of macro fungi, right? Because you can see it, I guess.
Right, because they're big.
Because they're big and you can see them. So they grow, there are ones that are, I think the word is saprophytic. I'm not good with fancy words, but saprophytic, I think, and means it grows on dead stuff.
Okay.
And then most of them are actually mycorrhizal, which means they grow in a kind of a symbiotic relationship with roots of other plants and trees. There are some trees that wouldn't be able to get enough nutrients if it weren't for the relationship they have with the fungus that grows around their root system. Fungus are the second largest, I guess, I don't know, family of things besides insects. Okay. So there's more insects than there are types of fungus, more types of insects than there are types of fungus. But
it's the second thing.
It's the second thing.
Holy crap.
It's, fungus are more closely related to animal kingdom than to plant kingdom. People think they're a plant, but they're kind of in the middle. They're not a plant because they don't use chlorophyll, or whatever they don't produce their own food. They eat externally,
They eat externally and they do they like, how like there's carbon dioxide and then oxygen. Do they do that? That sort of process?
I'm not sure.
Right.
I'm not sure what gases are involved in the process.
Fair enough.
I know that what happens is the mycelia, as they kind of grow through the soil, they excrete
Right.
enzymes that break down their food source, and then they digest it. So they work the same way we do, only
That's
we
crazy.
excrete our enzymes inside of ourselves.
And they do it externally.
And they do it externally.
Oh,
so they digest their food, and
that's how they spread. That's how they grow.
so that's how they feed.
Okay.
And then when it's time for them to spread and grow, what they do is they pop up a
flower.
basiliocarp, a fruiting body.
Yeah.
Which is the mushroom, what we see as the mushroom. That thing produces spores.
Right.
Which get either picked up by the wind, or sometimes, depending on the kind of mushroom, they rely on animals eating them and depositing their spores elsewhere.
Dashing off. Sure. Sure.
And that's how they spread. And they have to land on something that is going to be a food source and be able to germinate as well. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I saw a Jamie Oliver TV show on the Food Network, and he found a giant mushroom coming out of a tree, and it was called a hen of the woods.
Yes.
Have you ever seen one of those in real life?
Yes. And I actually found one this year that was about probably 15 pounds, maybe. It
15
was
pounds?
huge. I found it on a tree that had 3 of them. It had a big one, a medium-sized one, and a little one. And I left the little one as a gift to the forest.
Yeah.
And I took the other two. This is called Hen of the Woods. In English, it's Grifola frondosa is its
Nice.
Latin name.
Nice.
And it's known
You
as the
are dipped, Beth
maitake.
Schumann. You are dipped. It's awesome.
It's known as the maitake mushroom.
Oh.
Okay, so you might have heard that name. Maitake is a Japanese name. It means dancing mushroom.
okay.
Not that the mushroom itself dances. The idea is that if you find one, you will start dancing.
Yeah, they're really cool looking.
They're very cool, and they're delicious. They're really good for you.
And you have to look up. Or at least in this case, the guy had to look up.
Okay, so that might have been a chicken of the woods then, because a hen of the woods is always going to grow at the base of a tree.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
All right.
A hen of the woods grows on oak. It's going to grow at the base of the tree. You're going to find it in the fall.
Okay. A chicken of the woods?
A chicken of the woods grows also mostly on oak, but it could be any kind of hardwood. That one, and they're both, they both are parasitic, so they actually kill their host eventually.
Oh, okay. So it's kind of a good thing to cut them and eat them.
Well, you're not killing the mycelia. You know, the business end of that thing is still inside the tree or inside the ground or whatever.
Right,
you know?
right. Oh,
So,
that's awesome.
yeah, but the interesting thing about the hen of the woods is one of the most popular ones. I joined the Michigan Mushroom Hunters Club.
Oh,
It's one of the
sweet.
most popular ones out here for people to try and find. I went mushrooming with a bunch of other mushroom geeks.
Right.
We get along so well because we all love to talk about the same thing, and other people roll their eyes at us, you know.
But super fun.
But you got to know trees if you want to find mushrooms, and that was something
Oh, really?
that now I got to learn effing trees too,
Right.
Because apparently, like the maitake will only grow on oak, but it prefers
a certain
red
kind of
oak or something
Oh, my
like that,
God.
you know? And if there's no leaves on the trees, I don't know what I'm looking at. These
Yeah.
people are looking across the forest and going, somebody go check the back of that one over there, you know?
Because they can tell from the bark.
Because they can tell from the bark from a distance, you know, what kind of tree they're looking at. But I guess if you grow up in the woods, see, I grew up not in the woods.
Right. But
So-
I grew up adjacent to the woods. I don't know bark from bark. And
I got to learn it. Yeah.
I think you have to want to learn it, and then
I said to one of my neighbors up north, because actually where I do most of this mushroom hunting is up in northern Michigan. We have about 100 acres.
in the UP.
No, it's on the up northern part of the Lower Peninsula.
Okay, is it on Lake Michigan or more in the middle?
That's it's not on any of the lakes. It's kind of at the top of the peninsula. It's near Petoskey, but I guess that's Lake. I don't know.
That's fine.
I'm not good at the
so
lakes
it's like
yet.
it's an inland lake. It's a It's not a Lake Michigan or Lake
No,
Superior.
it's just an inland area, like
Yeah.
up north. So, I mean, it's kind of in the middle. It's actually a skiing area because there's, what we call mountains in Michigan.
I know. I know. Well, the thing is I've always thought of Wisconsin as being hilly, and Andy Ashcraft has alerted me that it is not. It is very, very flat because he grew up right in the middle of the mountain ranges of California.
Oh, yeah.
So he's like, I need there to be mountains, and I was like, well, it's hilly. It looks kind of like Hobbit in the Shire, and he's like, it's pretty.
Yeah. So that's where our land is
Yeah.
up there, and that's where
you do most.
That's where I do most of my mushroom hunting because we have a cabin up there. I spend like the whole summer. And we don't have running water. We have to use an outhouse outside of the cabin, but we do have high-speed internet because we have a satellite dish.
Right.
So we work up there, like, cause I do contract work, so marketing, right?
Yeah.
So, and my husband does the same. So we go up there and we work,
So you can work from the cabin.
I work from the cabin, and then when I'm done
but it's
working,
a real cabin.
It's a real cabin.
It doesn't have heat.
No heat, no insulation. It's only a 3-season cabin.
And it has electricity, though, clearly.
It has electricity.
Okay.
So it has electricity, and
but
we
no
have
running water.
No running water. And I spent 6 weeks up there straight this past year, the entire month of September, and then a week on either end.
Wow.
And I took a class at the local college on mushrooms of northern Michigan.
Mushrooms of northern Michigan.
It was so much fun, Jackie. And the other people in the class were absolutely hilarious. And my favorite part was on the first night, the woman asked us, why did we decide to take this class? And most people were like me. They gave the similar answer to me, which was, well, I enjoy walking through the woods and I see all these mushrooms and I'd like to know what it is I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. And one lady said she was she did botanical art, which I thought was very fascinating. And so she was looking for some new
stuff to paint or
I don't know, or to work with. Maybe she incorporates botanical items into her art. I don't know.
Right. Maybe.
But the best guy was the guy who said that, he was a survivalist and he wanted to know what he could eat out of the forest floor. And the reason why this was the best guy is because this guy was huge. I mean, one of the biggest mushroom hunters I've ever seen.
Like a giant man?
He was a giant, big man.
Like 6'6" and heavy?
I would say maybe 6'2" and heavy, really heavy. And he never bothered to get up out of his seat. And the whole point of the class was that we would stand around this table and pick up mushrooms and touch them and smell them and talk about them and stuff like that.
So the teacher brought in different...
And the guy sat in his seat and he would take his hand and kind of wave people out of his way so he could see. And I thought, you're too big to stand up.
Right. You are not going to survive.
I don't think survival is...
You're the survival of the not fittest. This is not going to. And as a person who does not work out or anything,
and then I was collecting the comment sheets at the end of the class.
Yeah.
And so when I picked up his, I happened to notice that one of his comments was not enough information about how to survive. I was like, it wasn't a survivalist class, dude.
Oh my God.
I'm like, go for a walk every once in a while. I think that's going to help you survive.
Maybe head out into the woods, Daniel Boone, and try to figure out, because what I've always wanted to do, and I've said it before here in the Dork Forest, is that I would love there to be time travel so that I could go back in time and go to my town, South Milwaukee, Wisconsin, right on Lake Michigan in this the 1600s, to have seen it when it was pristine like that.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know how to camp or anything. So what I really, I guess, want to do is go back in time and die of exposure. Because I will never be able to really. So she brought in, or the teacher was a man or woman?
A woman, and she was absolutely excellent. I mean, she really knew her stuff and has been a mycologist for years and teaching at all the various colleges and stuff like that. And so we had 3 classroom sessions and 3 foraging sessions. And so the first, I happened to talk to her on the phone before the first class. And I asked her, can I bring in some stuff that I have found around, my property, and I want to know what it is? She goes, oh, by all means, that's what the class kind of is. So people bring in stuff to have identified. She brings in stuff. And,
do you make sure that it's like at the garden center, they're like, don't bring in anything unless it's in a bag so that it doesn't contaminate other things.
Well,
but it's not a a garden center. It's a classroom, so it's not like a lot of other things.
I actually wondered about all those spores in the classroom and like if that would have a negative
or anything.
You know, it's not really a great idea to smell up a lot of spores. I wouldn't take a huge whiff of the spore producing end of
a poisonous mushroom.
Well,
Sounds like a terrible idea.
I mean, actually, the sense of smell is really important for identifying a lot of different mushrooms because some of them have a really unique smell, and that's the way that you can tell. Oyster mushrooms are one of those, but oyster mushrooms you can tell for a lot of other reasons. They're very easy to identify, but they have this oyster mushroom smell, and
very distinct.
Very distinct, and people have described it in so many different ways using words that don't make sense to me because I don't think you can put it into words. But once you know it, then when you smell it, you're like, oh, that smells like an oyster mushroom. Like, what, you know, it can't be anything else. But there are some mushrooms that smell of like that's chemical that they put into gas, natural gas, so that you know when you have a natural gas leak in your house. So there are there's mushrooms that smell. There's one mushroom I just found not too long ago in Ann Arbor in a park that's called a pheasant back.
Ooh.
A pheasant back. And it's actually edible, although the one I found by the time I found it was a little too old. This one smells like watermelon rind, like the green part of a watermelon. Yeah. It's just weird.
Just weird.
And there's another one that smells like raw potatoes. You know, so you kind of learn like what smells to associate with which mushrooms as well in order to identify.
You know, my grandmother used to pick mushrooms when I was a kid in South Milwaukee, and the way I was like, well, how do you know which ones are poisonous and which ones aren't? And she was like, well, you know how dimes are made out of silver, the old dimes. And I said, yeah. She said, I boil one with a dime, and if it doesn't turn black, it's edible.
Oh, okay. So that's
what I don't even know. I would never do that.
There may be some types of mushrooms that's a test for because some mushrooms
are they werewolves?
Put a little potassium salt on it, and if it turns purple, then it's this particular kind or whatever.
Really?
So there are chemical tests that you can do, but they say that most of those kind of old-fashioned tests are really just wives' tales. And if you see an animal eat it, it's edible. Not necessarily true.
Depends which animal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. A slug. I mean, I don't know. So there, I mean, the thing they tell you is unless you know for a fact that you have an edible species, do not eat it. So there have been things that I've thought this might be something, but in the end, I'm a very conservative person actually. Like when it comes to stuff
eating
like
mushrooms,
when it comes to eating stuff out of the ground, right out of the ground like that.
Right. So do you sometimes pick and eat the mushrooms?
Oh,
if
yes.
You know?
Now I do. And this year has been a banner year because it was a really wet year. So Michigan is famous. I would be remiss without mentioning the morel mushrooms. My husband always says moral mushrooms as a joke. So now I get confused. Morel mushrooms, which is they come in the spring. Their growth is triggered by the melting snow. So, so they come in the spring and they're famous. And I think in Wisconsin they have them too, but in Michigan it's really, really famous. And people come and hunt for the morel mushrooms, and it's a big thing. Right. So much so that people are like, oh, there are mushrooms that grow at other times of year too. Like they don't even know. They're just,
this is
all
the
they know
greatest
is morel.
episode of the Dork Forest.
This is very dorky.
Yay!
It's very, but so we have morel mushrooms on our land. That's kind of like everyone wants to know where the morels are, and they're worth a lot of money. You could sell them to restaurants, and people dry them and sell them, and blah blah blah. So we have the morel mushrooms. We have there's a kind of oyster mushroom. The family the genus for oyster mushrooms is Pleurotus, and there's one the famous one, the typical one is Pleurotus austriatus, right? Which I found here in Ann Arbor.
Oh wow!
But up north we have Pleurotus populinus, which grows on popple trees and
poplar. Popple trees?
Yes.
Or poplar?
No, popple, which I think
tree?
It's ash. I don't know. They have their own names for trees around here. And I'm probably showing my ignorance with that, but I don't think we ever call them that on the West Coast.
Right. And the thing is there's so many different kinds of trees and kinds of
And common names for things vary regionally like crazy too. So that's, especially even with mushrooms, that's why you're supposed to learn the Latin names, because the common names vary from region to region.
Okay.
You know? So those oyster mushrooms, the day I found them on the property, I was so excited. But the problem is they can grow really high up in the tree, and then you're standing there just like at the bottom looking at those delicious mushrooms up there. No way to get to them, because by definition it's a dead tree if there are mushrooms growing out of it.
Okay.
Well, this kind of mushroom,
that kind of mushroom,
the oyster mushroom, it grows on dead trees.
Things? Okay.
So that tree is dead already. So I'm standing there like, well, I'm not going to climb the damn tree because it could fall over. You know, I don't know what else to do. So my friends from the Michigan Mushroom Hunters Club have said, oh, we've created our own like mushroom poke and stick, you know, or whatever. Like, so I'm getting like some clues for how I might be able to toggle together a tool.
Right, without having to shimmy up a tree.
The best idea, somebody told me, is cut down the tree, drag it into your backyard.
That does feel particularly human, doesn't it?
It does.
You're like, we're gonna bring the whole tree.
Just bring the whole tree and put it in your backyard. So we have we have the morels, we have oysters.
Yep.
We do have porcini, but in this part of the country, what they call the porcini, which is the Boletus edulis.
Okay.
It's a complex, meaning that there isn't one specific one, but if there's kind of like a family of them.
Okay.
We do have those on our land as well. What we don't have are chanterelles, which you have in California, those chanterelles. And they have them in a lot of other places in Michigan, but not on our land, because it all depends on what kind of tree. Well, they grow under oak. We don't have any oak on our land.
Okay.
What we do have is cedar.
Okay.
A lot of cedar bog. Okay, like swampy area. So this year, the first, right before my first class, I went out and I got every mushroom I could find on the property. An example of one.
Okay.
The point wasn't just to find edible ones; it was to identify all mushrooms.
Yeah.
So I bring them into class, and this one mushroom, I said, is this a false chanterelle? I know it's not a chanterelle, but is it what they call a false chanterelle? And she said, no, I don't think so. Now, if a chanterelle is kind of orange color and it has its gills, if you will, it doesn't technically have gills, it has ridges, but its gills are attached to the stem instead of like free from the stem. They kind of run down the stem a little bit. That's called decurrent. So this one looked a little bit like that, but they all stopped at a certain point. Like it was attached to the stem, but it all stopped.
Okay.
She says, I think this is Lactarius deliciosus.
Deliciosus?
Well, so I remember that name, right? Because deliciosus.
It sounds like a really delicious milk.
It does, actually. So it turns out Lactarius are a type of mushroom where if you cut them, they will bleed a kind of a latex type of a material. And it's one of the things.
Them, do they not bleed?
If you cut, hey, we're full circle to the Shakespeare now.
Yeah, exactly. So you cut them, what do they bleed?
A latex, a type of a latex, and it's all different colors, and you can tell what kind of one it is by the color that comes out of it. So
weird.
This one, you cut it, and an orange latex comes out. When you handle it, the word mushroom hunters use is stain, but it's kind of like bruise. It bruises a certain color, so it'll stain dark brown or dark orange, this mushroom.
Okay.
On the top, it has concentric circles of orange in the shade of like a creamsicle.
Oh, weird.
Really pretty. Really pretty. So I found that we have a ton of these all over our land. Did some research on them. Technically, what we have is called Lactarius thynos, which is part of the Lactarius deliciosus complex.
Okay.
And I even read somebody's blog online saying, I don't know why they call the deliciosus when the thynos is so much more deliciosus. So
that is some deep.
So you're not going to find these ones in a store because, I mean, they're very specific. They grow in cedar bogs. Okay. So there aren't that many cedar bogs across the U.S., right? So anyway, I found a whole bunch of these. They're orange. They're beautiful. When you cook them, they're edible and they're delicious. When you cook them, they maintain their color.
Oh, wow.
So I made an orange mushroom gravy. And I had also found that same week or around that time a whole bunch of black trumpet mushrooms.
I've heard of those.
Those are Craterellus cornucopedes.
Nice.
And
It's awesome.
and those are awesome. And I made a black mushroom gravy sauce with those. So I had an orange mushroom sauce and a black mushroom sauce. So we could watch our Giants games or celebrate Halloween or whatever.
Oh,
so,
right. Oh,
yeah.
do it like that. So your fella turned you on to this.
Yeah, but he doesn't go with me as much anymore. He's like,
no, it's great.
I think it's great that you're doing this, Beth. But I've got something else to do. No, he goes with me every so often. As a matter of fact, we went, it's a little late in the season now to find any mushrooms around here, but, a couple of months ago, we went just on a bike ride through one of the local parks in Ann Arbor, and Ed found actually the 2 edible mushrooms that we found that day, shaggy manes, which are edible.
Okay.
And giant puffballs, Calveda ginorma or something. No, that can't be right. That can't be right.
But giant puffballs, those sound deadly.
So giant puffballs, that does sound deadly. And they, have you seen a giant puffball?
No.
It's about the size of a soccer ball, and it's
Really?
white. And kids love them because as they get older, you know what a puffball is, right? When you kick it or push it, the spores go poof up into the sky like in a big cloud. Yeah, yeah. They make a big puffy cloud of that. But if you find them when they first pop up, they are, there's no spores yet. And, as long as you cut it through and it's white all the way through, it hasn't started to turn yellow or start to produce spores. It's edible. Now, it doesn't really, it has a mild mushroomy flavor. It's kind of the tofu of mushrooms. Because the key thing is it's going to pick up whatever flavor you cook it in. Okay. But it has, they're good for you. Mushrooms are good for you. They're high in protein. They're usually high in minerals, and they have often have a lot of mushrooms have some of the highest like anti-cancer and immune boosting chemicals or whatever. Kind of things.
Now that's interesting because I think I thought I had read somewhere that they weren't useful as far as food goes.
They don't have a lot of calories, so they don't give you a lot of energy in that regard. Okay. But they do have a lot of good stuff in them. Okay. Medicinal stuff. Okay.
Because I would think a giant puffball it'd be really a great way to sort of extend the life of your dinner.
You know what it is? That's what it is. To me, it's the free food aspect of it. My husband was trying to make a list. My mother-in-law was like, why is Beth so into mushrooms? Did you know that about her when you married her? And
he said, he was like,
he told me he made up his own top 10 list of why Beth loves mushrooms so much. And I'll see if I can remember. One of them is actually that you get to go outside and have exercise, which I am not an athletic person at all. And I struggle with trying to do something with my body. Yeah. And I have found that, hiking through the woods, I can do it. I enjoy it, and I'm getting some exercise. I take pictures, a lot of pictures of the mushrooms. That's actually how I got started before I started learning what they were and what was edible. I would just take pictures of them all over the place. I have an album. That's right. I wanted to mention that on I have a public photo album on my Facebook page, that's called Fungus Among Us. And it's just pictures of mushrooms.
The kind of puns that are coming out of your mushroom people. I can't wait. I can't wait to know more. I can't wait to see them all. But it's at Beth Schumann, Schumann for just Twitter. Right. But it's Beth Schumann, Korczynski.
Yes.
Jackie.
You're throwing away your If you search Beth Schumann, you'll find me on Facebook too.
As well. And that's where the Fungus Among Us.
That's where the Fungus Among Us album is. And I have to admit, I'm so embarrassed because, I put up pictures of mushrooms with the incorrect Latin name, and it's been on my list of things to do. To go back and fix some of them. I know, for example, I've got a photo up there of Hericium that I called it a Hericium colloides, and it's a Hericium americanus, and I just feel like such a doofus.
Well, and a true mushroom is the backlash of it's Gamergate but mushrooms, and just throwing down. They're like, we're gonna take this to the streets.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love the idea because I do. How do you prepare different mushrooms?
Well, mushrooms, because they're closer to the animal kingdom than to the plant kingdom, you kind of want to treat them like meat in a sense. Like, so you can marinate them, you can bake them, you can steam them, you can boil them, but the most common thing people do is saute them. They go really, really well with like shallots or garlic or something like that. I've started doing this thing. Yeah, a little olive oil, a little butter. They tell you not to use too much butter because the mushrooms will soak up a lot of that butter. And if you're lactose intolerant, like you'll find, you have to keep adding more oil in there. And then you'll get sick from the butter, not necessarily from the mushroom, But like, we discovered a recipe that's, I don't know how to pronounce French words, but it's spelled Duxelles. And so we're like, is it douze? So we've just been calling them doozies because we don't know how to pronounce it. Because we live in Michigan.
We're doing this.
So we've been making doozies out of mushrooms lately. And then I use it kind of as a meat substitute, as a ground meat substitute.
How do you make a doozy?
You just chippy chop up the mushroom and like
make them tiny or
make them tiny. I could even probably put them through the grinder if it's a firm bodied mushroom and just cook it up with
like a paste.
Yeah, like a paste. Yeah,
mushroom paste.
Kind of like a paste a little bit, and you could just use it to mix with. Well, then you mix it. Then it's an ingredient in other things. Like I've mixed it with cream cheese to make a mushroom dip, kind of a thing. Or I made it, used them instead of clams in linguine.
Okay.
Because actually I had oyster mushrooms, which do have a little bit of a seafood flavor to them. And so I used these instead. And then last night I made a vegan mapo tofu, Japanese style.
What is that?
Well, in a Chinese restaurant, it'll be known as spicy tofu or Szechuan style tofu dish or something like that. But it's called mapo tofu. And in Japan is my favorite way that they make it. And they use ground pork. Yeah. So, I used these, I took some maitake mushrooms, cultivated ones I bought at the store actually.
Okay.
And chippy chopped them up and cooked that and used it as a substitute for the ground pork instead. So they have a lot of protein but lower calories and no cholesterol,
Right.
And then there's there are people who say that they cured their cancer from, eating certain kinds of mushrooms or whatever. I don't know about that. I mean, I don't really want to give people
the
ideas
think system
that
also works from the Music Man.
Oh yeah.
That's how you can learn how to play an instrument. You just think the minuet in B. or C or whatever.
Right. But I do think that that there are health benefits to be had. Like the oyster mushrooms, for example, can actually lower your cholesterol. So if you have a high cholesterol problem, eat more oyster mushrooms. Oyster mushrooms are also fascinating because they eat meat.
They eat meat?
Yes. The cells, the mycelia, the parts of a mushroom are made out of something called hyphae, which are specific kind of cells, and they can take a couple of different forms. And the oyster mushroom creates a circular hyphae, and then inside the log that it's living in, and then if a little worm, a little nematode tries to crawl through, it lassos it and captures it and eats that damn thing. So it supplements its own diet of wood.
with worms
with
and whatever
worms and
in it,
wood,
something small enough.
And then, there's all these mushrooms. They say that the zombie apocalypse is going to come about because of fungus, because about the zombie wasps and
No.
Oh, so there's this kind of fungus. I can't remember the name of it. Synopsis. That can't be right. Sinise. Okay. No, he's an actor. I can't remember the name of it. But anyway, it attacks, it attacks ants or beetles or, wasps. There's one. And, there's one that attacks, what they call the winter moth or something like that in Tibet. and it's the biggest cash crop in Tibet, is people finding these fungus as they're like popping out, because the moth will build itself a little cocoon and the fungus is in there with it and then starts eating on that thing inside the cocoon, and then it pops up its little mushroom.
Yeah.
They're really, really teeny. And people crawl on the hillsides finding these things and pull them out and sell them to the Chinese who think they're an aphrodisiac. So it's like the biggest cash crop in Tibet. Anyway, but in South America, this kind of fungus will attack ants, and it sends chemical messages to the ant brain, and tells it to climb to a certain point on a tree and then clamp down with its teeth and stay there. And so that's the perfect environment for the mushroom then for the fungus to be in.
Weird.
I know. And so that's why,
that's why the zombie apocalypse
is supposed to be, when it happens, it'll supposedly happen because of fungus.
Because a fungus will control an ant that will then grow from it. And that's fungus mind controlling an ant. Possibly the most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my life.
Yes.
That is awesome.
Yes.
Holy crap. All we gotta do is make that 1,000 times bigger.
So these things are fascinating, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, and they're also gonna save the planet too. They just found fungus that will eat oil spills and plastic garbage in the ocean and stuff like that. So they're decomposers.
We have those two things. We have oil spills.
That's what I mean.
It's going to be the greatest day for a fungus in its life, 'cause we've got some bullshit going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, if they just I'm not sure, somebody probably wants to commercialize that first.
Right. How do we monetize that?
They got to monetize it first.
How do we gamify that?
But we're not going to save the planet for nothing.
Right. We're not going to just do it. It's, what do I get out of it? A sandwich? Yes, you get a sandwich, Dick Cheney.
Yeah. We've got fungus as food, fungus as ecological, miracles.
Yeah.
And they're cool to look at too, I mean, like there's a website called Fantastic Fungi. I don't know if it's .net or .com, but they have a photo gallery there, and it's like, crowdsourced. So people like upload their photos with a certain hashtag to Instagram,
fungus porn.
And it's total fungus porn. Absolutely. And some of them
People
are very cool.
board.
There are mushrooms that glow in the dark.
Oh, I bet. Very Sirens of Titan kind of Vonnegut. But that's crazy, because I bet you, the greatest thing about the internet is that you can find like-minded individuals.
Oh, yeah.
It's, so are there books that you're constantly trying, like, getting in the library, or are you buying them? How do you?
Yeah, so, the mushrooms vary by region, and, the Rockies are a great divider, so,
right.
that's why I had to take a class here in Michigan, because, there are mushrooms that are the same, we have chanterelles and stuff, but for the most part, they could be very different or grow on different types of wood here.
Okay.
So you just have to learn. Like, for example, I forget which mushroom it is, but there's a mushroom as long as it's growing on, something, it's fine. But if you ever find it growing on hemlock, don't eat it. Well, now I gotta fucking know what hemlock looks like.
Right.
Exactly.
Right, well, that's the greatest thing about all of these sort of projects. Like, if you start looking at birds, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, now I need to know trees, and I need to know, because that looks like a bluebird, but is it a bluebird or is it something else? Right,
exactly. So I have a book on fungus of the Midwest that actually just came out. It has a lot of good pictures. But on the web, there's a couple of different websites that are really, really good that have like a lot of details. But there's really, to me, I don't think there's any substitute for, it's like being a comedian. There's no substitute for stage time, right? There's no substitute for forest time, for foraging time. Looking and touching and smelling and talking to somebody who knows what they're looking at. Sometimes I'll take mushrooms to the farmer's market, because there's a mushroom lady at the farmer's market. And mushroom people love to talk about it.
Mushrooms, yeah.
So they'll be like, "Ooh, where'd you get those?" And they'll start talking to you about it and stuff. So it's it's very community oriented until you find a patch of mushrooms, and then you say, "Oh, I'm just walking over here for no reason whatsoever." You guys might as well go in that direction. But
because
community breaks down when you find a gold mine of mushrooms.
These are like mine, only my mushrooms. These are my mushrooms.
Where'd you find those mushrooms? Up in northern Michigan.
I don't think I can find them again. Don't worry about it.
Pretty sure I can't be any more specific than to say Michigan. And they're like, you're never supposed to tell anybody where you found.
Oh, that's hilarious. They're just like, well, are there people who buy land just because of the mushrooms? I bet you.
Oh boy, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's you were asking about you're not supposed to pick flowers. We started there. So this teacher that I had this class with, she took us to the U of M biological station to go foraging as part of our class.
Yes.
And on our way out, I noticed the signs that said, do not remove any, plant material. Right. And I figure she works for U of M
or
something.
Some sort of
so
dispensation
must be
something.
Okay, but mushroom people always will argue, well, it's not technically a plant. And, so I'm not removing plant material, or they'll give you the argument that it's just a fruit. It's like picking an apple from a tree. You're not hurting anything.
But I was at Hearst Castle and I wanted to pick a pomegranate and they were like, nope. And I said, yeah, but there's 1 million pomegranates. And because the Hearst Castle, the Hearst grounds, he planted so much, there's so much food on that, on that. And they're like, no. And I said, well, what happens when they fall? And they're like, well, they just cart them off. And I was like,
so that to me just sounds stingy. That's your basic 1%ers saying, I'm pretty sure this is our land and not yours.
Right.
But I think that when the state does that,
it's preservation.
I think it's preservation in that case. There's some woods right in Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor's great, by the way. I mean, like in San Jose, we had my park strip in front of my house was like the green space in our neighborhood, So, I mean, we have, there's parks everywhere here. So there's some woods and I'm walking through the woods and it butts up against two different schools that I think they did that on purpose.
Yeah.
And so for the kids can go into the woods and, they have nature walks and stuff, whatever. So they have signs saying that you're not allowed to remove anything. You're not allowed to go off the trail.
Okay.
Well, I accidentally went off the trail when I saw a gorgeous mushroom and, I felt like such a criminal. It was so funny because I'm like, oh my God, that's a lion's mane. That lion's mane is the hericium. It's my favorite mushroom. It's got a nutty flavor and it's delicious. It's absolutely delicious. And it's one of the top 5, immune boosting mushrooms.
Oh, there you go.
And so it's really good for you. And I see it and it's perfect. It's just like perfect, beautiful right there.
Now's the time to get it.
Look around. I don't see anybody. Oops, I dropped my keys off the trail. I better go get them. And then as I'm cutting this mushroom and putting it in my bag, I stand up and there's a jogger, running behind me. And I'm like, he probably doesn't care. He probably thinks,
he doesn't.
What's that crazy person taking shit off of a tree for? So I don't know who would care. I honestly don't. They have the signs up, but I really don't know who would turn me in for taking a mushroom off a log.
So, okay, 2 questions. One is a basic, when you're walking around in the woods, are you constantly, do you have to look down? Are you looking up?
So this is part of the problem of being a mushroom hunter is sometimes I get so excited thinking about Pleurotus populinus that I forget to even look for Boletus edulis, So because they could grow up in trees, they could grow on the ground, they could grow, on at the base of a tree, pretty much anywhere. However, what I'm mostly going to look for is decaying wood because although a lot of them, like the chanterelle, is going to grow on a living tree. It doesn't grow on the tree; it grows on out of the rootstock. But That'll grow on a living tree, but a lot of the ones I'm looking for, I know, grow on dying wood. So it's a good place to start.
Okay.
The other thing is if you know what time of year it is and what season, what might be coming, then you know, oh, hen of the woods is up now. I'm going to look at the base of the oak trees,
right.
So that kind of thing. So knowing what you're looking for, what environment it likes.
And what season.
Season it is. But I am my eyes are constantly darting around the ground. It's a weird obsession.
Yeah.
I'm driving in the car and I'm like drive past woods and I'm like constantly turning my head like unsafely looking. Do I see anything? Do I see anything?
Wow.
Do I see anything?
Yeah.
And I'm totally obsessed because there's a tree that I know that grows oysters and
so you check on it?
I check on it. Not anymore. No, the season's kind of over now, but I would check on it and I would be like, feel that antsy, itchy feeling like in the morning, like, I better go. I think I better go check on that tree.
We sometimes get a mushroom in our front yard that I will now be taking a photo of and sending you that photo so that you can say,
yeah.
And that I'm very excited. Beth Schumann, you should know this. It's been an hour.
Oh my goodness.
I know it.
I have so much more to say.
I know. I'm going to have you back. But it's at Beth Schumann on Twitter and it's Beth Schumann Korchinski on Facebook with the public fungus among us photos if people want to check it out. And you're doing you do stand up at Ann Arbor Showcase and you work wherever you get to.
Yes.
Doing the stand up comedy with the talking.
Right around in the Midwest area.
Right. And thank you so much for being on the Dork for us.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, folks. Take care out there.
My hat, my hat, my hat. They're dancing around my hat. My hat, my hat, my hat. Well, what do you think of that? If it looks like a Mexican hat dance and it sounds like a Mexican hat dance, it's most likely a Mexican hat dance. So take off your hat and let's dance.
Yay! Oh my God. Why don't we just call that as the end of the show?